broadband has such an impact on healthcare, on education, on public safety, on energy and the environment. You think about that list of issues, it sounds like the 08 campaign, it sounds like the election. All the big issues that people are talking about are affected profoundly by the availability or lack of availability of broadband. So we have all these questions, the productivity of the economy, the future of our economic growth, our competitiveness in the global economy are all determined by this, no matter where we are in the rankings. So there's no question in my mind that we need a national broadband strategy in order to respond to those pressures.
Broadband connections are an input to the production of the economy. And what we're looking for is economic growth. Okay? And we believe that broadband provides economic growth and productivity. But every country may not convert a connection in the same way as a different country. Okay? So there can be heterogeneity in the conversion of broadband into economic output. So ranking them and saying this is that and we're bad because we're 15 really is mistaken, not only because there's some problems with data, but what can the U.S. do with its connections versus what can Turkey or Mexico do with their connections? A little bit of broadband in Turkey may double their economic growth rate, or that may not, or this country may not do anything at all. There's looking at an OECD report the other day, and it says firm-level studies suggest that the use of ICT has positive impacts on firm performance and productivity. We all believe that, but the benefits occur primarily or only when accompanied by other changes in investments. Okay, so it's not just about broadband and economic growth. There are many pieces to that puzzle, and we have to take that into consideration.
Well, I think markets actually consist of a whole range of factors, and I would include studies like the OECD studies of factor in the marketplace. In other words, a comparison like that, although I think it's a snapshot, it's one piece of the data you need to look at, it does help focus people and competitors focus on it and say we want to do better. So it's not a bad thing to have spurs like that saying we need to continue to improve or gain. My concern has really been that the focus seems to be exclusively on this comparative number, and that's kind of like the whole debate on broadband. If you look at our deployment of files, for example, and the concern about speed that's been expressed as well in this whole debate, I mean, the fact is we're doing it files in part because we know speed sells. The market actually is telling us that. I mean, we can see people, for example, taking our DSL lines and converting to files. And so we're sort of self-cannibalizing a little bit, but that's because people want more speed. So my view is that the kind of market we've created in the United States, where there is platform competition pretty widely, the numbers that Taylor talked about in terms of the comparison of broadband, cable, modem, and DSL, we're competing in most of those places, and that's actually driving us to invest. So overall, I think the report is good in the sense that it actually does provide a continuing spur. It is not the only factor, as George said, there's a lot of other things we ought to be looking at. I think in particular we ought to be looking at, are we making progress in getting new technology being deployed? And on that score, the United States is doing quite well. If you look last year, for example, the number that the Fiber to the Home Council had was we're the fastest growing fiber to the home country in the world. Now, Japan has been doing it longer, so they got a bigger base, they admit that. This year, we're still the biggest. And it's partly because of our deployment, but it's partly also because other companies are beginning to push out fiber too, not only to the home in all cases, but they're putting it on their networks, at least close to the home. So I think we're seeing a lot of conversion of new technology out there that's really been very good for the United States, and it's largely because we have a competitive framework that works. And that's not to be critical of Europe. There are some countries, as we mentioned, that do have platforms that compete, but a lot of European countries don't. So it's a little harder for them to get the kind of, I think, the kind of investment, the kind of competition we're seeing in the United States. We have had the most experience with the Connected Nation model, and one of the reasons we like it is that it actually does get really good granular data from the companies. It's a cooperative approach. It is not a government mandate kind of approach or process, so you tend to get really street-by-street data. The maps that were produced in Kentucky, and we're going to see one, I think, very shortly in West Virginia because they're using the same process. The one in California that they produced are quite granular, and it's not only about where broadband is and where it isn't, but it's also about speed and uptake as well. So those are all good dates. That approach is good. There's a bill, as you probably know, in Congress, marking has legislation which incorporates some features of this approach, and there's also a Senate bill that does somewhat similar. I think the issue there is going to be funding. We're going to need some kind of grant program, I think, to help kind of promote these kinds of things in the states. And then how you take that data and aggregate it up, because you do want to have a national